A few months ago, the celebrant team, the dozen or so church members who work with Reverend Aaron and me to prepare our Sunday services, were mulling over topics for the services this month with its theme, "What does it mean to be a people of desire?" We knocked around a few ideas for a while, but there was an elephant in the room that was going unnamed, at least until Aaron decided to speak up. Given the theme of desire, she said, "Shouldn't we have a sermon this month about sex?" Yes, I agreed, but not enthusiastically. I had been thinking about that too, I said. Good, Aaron replied. I'll look forward to hearing you preach that sermon. And everyone laughed, except for me. Now, you know I am, for better or worse, a narrative preacher. If I haven't lived it myself and found a way to talk about it through stories from my own life, I rarely choose to preach about it. So immediately, upon hearing the expectations from the group that a service focused on sex would be a good fit for February, I wondered how in the world I could approach it. Susan puts up with a lot being a minister's wife, it's true. But there is no way I would be sharing stories about our sex life from the pulpit. Let's say I desire a higher quality of life than would be possible if I made that mistake. This is not to say that sex is not a good topic for a service, evidenced by your enthusiasm about it. And it's also not to say I won't someday find a way to talk about it, but let's face it, why would I make this last sermon I share with you before I leave for a 5-month sabbatical so challenging and potentially dangerous? And then, as the team continued to brainstorm, John Royal began talking about how in every relationship there is a high desire partner and a low desire partner, and that these roles shift for the people involved depending on the topic. And that, in most relationships, the person with the low desire is often in the most powerful position. Ooh, high desire, low desire. The person with the low desire is the person who calls the shots. That's it, I shouted. That's what I want to talk about. I think the group still thought I was going to talk about sex. And I guess that's one application you could make with my comments today. But I'm equally interested in the give and take of how we, in the relationships of our lives, navigate this high desire, low desire tension that is always there, regardless of the topic. The ways in which our expectations of having our own desires matched or met by others can take us away from the highest responsibility we do have. The responsibility of managing ourselves in the relationship. I will, later in the sermon, share an application of the high desire, low desire dynamic that is, perhaps, as equally taboo as sex. How's that for foreshadowing? While the high desire, low desire tension can be experienced in any kind of interpersonal relationship, I do acknowledge that the more intimate or important that relationship is to us, the more intense the tension can be. I can think of lots of examples from my marriage, for example, where either Susan or I can be high desire about something while the other is low desire. From cleaning to cooking to caring about things that the other simply cannot care about in the same way. And I think of the high desire Susan and I have for our 12-year-old to clean up after herself versus her apparently low desire to do so. And I think of the high desire my family may have for what I will accomplish around the house during my sabbatical versus the low desire I may find I have for this work once I start it. The list is endless, right? How do we choose to navigate these tensions? Well, that will have everything to do with the health of our relationships and our satisfaction in them. In his book, Passionate Marriage, clinical psychologist David Snark describes the high desire, low desire tension. He writes, "There is a high desire and a low desire partner on almost every marital issue, And these positions often reverse across the many issues married couples face. Who schedules the vacations? Who puts the kids to bed early? Who closes the bedroom door? Who scouts out the next car or house to buy? The impact of each action depends on who did it, the high desire or the low desire partner. Are you the high desire or low desire partner on a particular issue, he asks. It makes no difference if it's sex, intimacy, spending money, visiting in-laws, disciplining your kids when they need it. If you're the low desire partner, confronting and mobilizing yourself will settle your marital system down. If you're the high desire partner, mobilizing yourself will heat things up when your spouse refuses to do likewise, which is why the high desire partner often stops self-mobilizing and the tyranny of the lowest common denominator surfaces. The tyranny of the lowest common denominator. Or the high desire partner tries to bludgeon the low desire partner into mobilizing in the same direction. If the high desire partner perseveres while the low desire partner remains inactive, both spouses eventually confront the two-choice dilemma. Give up one's goals and values, or possibly give up one's spouse. Schnarch suggests the way to working through these dynamics without succumbing to an either-or choice of giving up goals or giving up each other involves each partner being willing to self-confront, to be responsible for their own behavior, to self-mobilize, to seek the outcome they desire without expecting the other to do it for them, and to self-soothe, to manage their own anxiety that arises from differences of desire without blaming or shaming the other person. In short, the success of the relationship will depend on each partner holding on to themselves. Schnarch writes, when you stop expecting your partner to put up with your limitations, they become more willing to do just that, which creates a dynamic push for growth. When partners won't confront themselves, they start confronting each other instead, attempting to control their partner to keep from being pressured by the marital system. Partners who hold on to themselves don't have the same need to control each other. They can encounter their partner's influence without feeling engulfed. Now, in that hiking story from today's reading, for example, the wife had to confront herself as she made her decision not to move. She had to carefully consider her own choices and behavior to be sure she was being thoughtful in the relationship. Then she had to manage her own reactivity to her husband losing it. She had to navigate the differences in their desire with emotional balance. And by doing so, she actually left space for her husband to figure it out, which was not only his responsibility, but actually the best hope for the situation and for their relationship going forward. Meanwhile, the husband had to eventually do all the same things she did, though admittedly a bit later than he would have chosen to had he not been freaking out. It was only through self-confrontation, self-mobilization, and self-soothing that he was able to offer the apology his wife and their relationship deserved. Schnarch calls these opportunities when partners have to squarely face their differences and manage their behavior through what could be marriage gridlock, crucible moments. Crucible moments, he calls them. These are moments that could, without care, too easily lead to irreconcilable differences. But when engaged by each partner with commitments to self-confrontation, self-mobilization, and self-soothing, these moments can lead the partners to be less adversarial and more respectful of their inherent separateness. They can lead the partners to discover that their own differentiation as unique individuals will enable them to better understand themselves and each other in ways that are essential for their health as individuals and as a couple. Now, the truth is that we bring to this room today many differences in our relationship status. But there is at least one thing we have in common that, while not a marriage, is a relationship of importance and of value, and that is our relationship to this church, and thereby to each other. And so I ask you to bear with me now as I turn this sermon toward an application of the high desire, low desire dynamic that is very present for me right now as we are in the midst of our budget drive here at church. That's right. I'm not going to talk about sex. I'm going to talk about money. Money. Before I get too far, I want to tell you a story, though. I want you to imagine me 17 years ago in the foyer of the Unitarian Church of Evanston, just outside of Chicago, greeting people on one of the first Sundays of my ministerial internship. As I saw them coming, the couple was instantly familiar to me, but at first I couldn't recall why. As the man and woman approached, I had to rifle through my memory, the way I sometimes do when I see grocery store checkers or waitresses in places other than where they work. I knew these two for sure, but where had I known them? And then it hit me. They were members of my home congregation, the church where I had been an active member through the first couple years of seminary. But these two were not just members of my home church. They were leaders. I'm talking institutionalists, the people who did the jobs that so few seem willing to do. You know, like dealing with money, for example. In fact, one of them had even served as treasurer for a few years, which for the small congregation we had once shared, meant doing more than just keeping an eye on the paid work of others. It meant doing all the accounting work for the church as a volunteer. "Hi," I exuberantly proclaimed as I reached to shake their hands, a bit amped on the adrenaline that arose as I remembered their names in time to actually use them in conversation. "So what brings you here this morning?" I continued. "We go to church here now," the husband said without much effect. "Oh, did you move to Evanston?" I asked. "Nope, we're commuting from Chicago." I paused to digest this information, and I guess they could see that I was trying to figure out why they would drive 45 minutes to go to this church rather than stay at the congregation where they had given so much, the congregation that was a short drive from their home. The woman leaned in a bit. She lowered her voice, and she said, "Mark, we just couldn't deal with how little some people contributed there. Some people give thousands of dollars to the church each year, and other people barely give any at all. I just couldn't stomach it anymore." Actually, she didn't say she couldn't stomach it. She said something a bit more descriptive and foul and dripping with the resentment that had driven her from her church, the place where she and her husband had given so much of themselves. Now, I had served on the finance committee of this church that they had left, but I didn't have access to individual pledge records, so I had no firsthand experiences of the dynamic she described. Still, I had no reason to doubt her assessment, even as it made me sad. I was new to the ministry then, and frankly, new to church life as an adult. I figured people gave different amounts, and it would always be that way, given that everyone has different financial circumstances. I wondered if she wasn't being a bit too reactive about it all. "Well," I said, "I'll bet some were doing the best that they could." "Not enough of them," she said. And then she and her husband moved along to find their seats for the services to come. As I watched them walk away, many questions arose. I wondered what it would be like to be so angry at the way others pledged to the church that leaving seemed the best option. I wondered how long it would take for them to become disenchanted with the church in Evanston for the same reason. Surely the people in the new congregation were not that different from the people at the other, right? Were the people at the Chicago church we had shared truly cheap? Or had they not been invited to pledge with enough skill and inspiration? To motivate generous giving. What message might have moved some of the people in that congregation to give more? And was expecting them to give more even reasonable or fair? Who could really know for sure? This couple's access to church finances did give them a privileged position to pass judgment on the giving habits of others, I suppose. But the questions their judgments offered me that morning have never left me, not entirely, and they usually return most strongly each budget drive season of my ministry, as I have worked with church leaders here to come up with approaches that inspire generosity, that lead people to fund the church they truly desire. Through the lens of the high desire, low desire dynamic, This couple may have been justified to leave. Perhaps leaving was their way of self-confronting or self-soothing. But they lost their relationship in the process. We do it all the time, don't we? We humans, we lovers of leaving, we get frustrated or disappointed in our relationships, the ways others don't meet our desires, and we pack up our things and go away rather than hang in and take responsibility for ourselves in the relationship. Sometimes we have no choice but to leave. And sometimes we leave because we haven't fully and honestly confronted ourselves. A pause now for perhaps my favorite joke of all time. Some time ago, a man was discovered alone on a deserted island. When the rescue team came ashore, the man was eager to give them a tour of the island where he had spent more than 5 years and the life he had built for himself there. He showed the group the cave where he slept, the cove where he bathed, and the clearing where he did his exercising. He pointed to a hut, said, "This is where I keep my hunting and fishing supplies." He directed them to an open-air shelter where there was a small fire burning, telling the group, "This is where I cook." He escorted them to a little shack in the woods. "This is where I worship and pray," where you could say, "I go to church." The rescue team was very impressed and were busy congratulating him on his creativity as a castaway, when one of them noticed another hut a few hundred yards up the beach. "What's that building for?" they asked. "Oh, that's where I used to go to church." Man, I love that joke. Ugh. Now that I've been in ministry for a while, I get why this couple that left their home congregation was frustrated. And honestly, I sometimes sense a similar frustration among leaders here as we consider the financial needs of our church and the different levels at which people invest. These differences in giving are to be expected and may be entirely justified by circumstances. But acknowledging that it's possible that everyone is giving as generously as they can doesn't make some of us any less anxious, especially this time of year, when the pressures of facing budget deficits can weigh on our spirits and scare us with their possible implications. If we don't raise the money we need, we start wondering, where will we cut? Who will feel the impacts of those cuts the most? Whether you are new here or you have called this church home for decades, I think that many of you would be truly surprised and inspired by how generous some people are to this congregation. And like me, I'm sure you would be grateful at how they have prioritized this church as a primary investment of their lives so that many can receive and participate in the ministry of this healthy, dynamic congregation. As I mentioned last week, I know my own giving heart has been grown by their example, such that Susan and I have been making an annual gift to the church that now puts us in the visionary category on that Fair Share Giving Guide that's in your order of service. This is the guide I'm talking about. Susan and I are now in the visionary category. Look, I never thought that I would give so much to a church, even as the minister. But I do. Actually, Susan and I do. And our investment in this place makes a difference, just as your investments do. Every dollar. I see the rewards every day in the life of our church, don't you? And so for us visionary folks, the question always arises, how can we encourage more of you to share our desire? And the short answer is, we can't. We can't. It's not up to us to change your desire. Only you can do that. And we hope through participating in this church and receiving the opportunities and the blessings it offers to your lives, you will. We can, however, tell you why we care about this place enough to make the investments that we do. We can invite you to consider the church that you desire and what you would be willing to contribute to make that church a reality. And we can give you enough information so that you can come to your own conclusions about what a fair share gift would be to this, your religious home, and to our ministry together, and to the relationships that this ministry creates. And so that's what we try to do in our budget drive every year. We create these brochures and pages on our website that explain what we need and what it will take to get us there. We share facts about how we spend our money, what fair share giving might look like. We invite everyone to small group or one-to-one meetings to discuss the impact our congregation has and the financial realities of the church. And I do hope you'll sign up to attend one of those small group gatherings. As Heidi said, you can find out more online or at the budget drive table in the foyer. And we ask you to give what you can, hoping that you will consider moving on that fair share giving guide at least one slot to the right, if you can. If your pledge wouldn't put you on the chart, we invite you to make one that does. If you are currently a supporter, we invite you to become a sustainer. If you are a sustainer, we invite you to become a visionary. Look, we don't want to bludgeon anyone with our high desire for a financial healthy church with a bold mission. And we don't want to shame anyone who does not have the resources to give more generously. But we do want to hold on to ourselves in this relationship, to you and to our church. We want to stay true to our values. And so we tell you things like we seek to raise $70,000 more in this drive than last year, which is a 12% increase. And we tell you that with the death of our friend David Hurd, who along with his wife Trudy have been extraordinarily generous over the years, we should probably be asking you for more. We tell you that what you give matters because it does. We tell you that every dollar you can increase in your pledge or every dollar you can pledge for the very first time will make a difference because it will. And perhaps most importantly, we're going to feel good about inviting you to join in financially supporting the ministry of this church as generously as you can, and we trust you will feel good about it too. The health of our relationship as a congregation and the future of our ministry together demands that we do. So let me say to you, thanks in advance for your generous pledges of support to this church, this place that matters so much to so many of us. Your generosity makes everything we do together possible.